Simyeol's art is a big inspiration for me. The calm, detailed and ethereal look of this artist's works is amazing. I would like to focus on what we can learn from it for our own art and lives. Then I would also like to look at the word enchanting and what we can learn from this as well. What does the word enchanting mean? It can be used to refer to something powerfully pleasing, appealing, delightful, charming or attractive. For one, it can refer to these positive words describing perceiving something which leads to a better feeling, a feeling of delight or fascination. The noun form of the verb enchantment can also refer to this, however it can also refer to a state of being under a spell or magic. With this definition in mind, I would like to go through Simyeol's art in this video. When I first discovered this artist's work, I was fascinated by it. It looked enchanting. This is why I would like to focus on the topic of enchanting things in art and life today. Hi, I'm May, and if you would like to improve your life and maybe also your art through this, I hope this video can be of help to you. Let's start with going through different elements in Simyeol's art. Lines are thin, there is some varying thickness. Lines tend to be clean, in a few cases they can be painted over. The lines have a rather gentle look, they blend a bit into the illustration. The line color contributes to this. Most of the lines are colored slightly darker than the flat color around them. What stands out is the softness of the lines. They guide the viewer's gaze without demanding attention. Rather than rigid outlines, the strokes feel like quiet gestures, enough to suggest structure while still blending into the colors and light. This gives each figure a calm, natural look. There's something enchanting about subtlety. A loud voice may capture attention for a moment, but a gentle one can hold it. Just like in these lines, life's beauty often grows in restraint, in knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet. Gentleness isn't weakness but wisdom in action. There's strength in choosing peace when pride tempts us to force control, for example. Learning to live with soft lines, clear where needed, calm where possible, can make our presence feel lighter, more inviting and quietly strong. Bodies generally tend to be slender and elegant. They are around 8 heads tall. For males, the bodies are usually a bit wider. Especially the arms are rather thin, the bodies have elongated proportions. They're not too muscular, making the bodies appear more elegant this way. The poses often convey harmony between form and emotion, adding to a dynamic but flowy and calm look with well-balanced proportions that fit to this. In life, being in proportion can mean keeping priorities right, caring for the body, mind and spirit so that none outweighs the others. While clothes cover the bodies of characters, having a good foundation underneath supports a good pose in any illustration. Just as artists study anatomy to understand how the unseen supports the visible, we're reminded that what's beneath character, patience, faith gives structure to what others see. An enchanting life, like well-drawn anatomy, is about inner alignment that shows through every small movement. The faces are rather long with a slightly wider chin. The chin also protrudes forward. It can be a bit pointy in the side view. The face outline is soft and often rounded. In the 3/4 view for the outer side, the face outline goes inward and outward, giving the faces an elegant look. The change of direction for the face is usually covered by hair here. For more complex angles, the face outline tends to fade. The nose is portrayed with a thin line that is often slightly colored. The line tends to have a change in direction, the upper part portraying the nose bridge and the lower line the nose end. A nostril can also be added. Some light or shadow can be added on the upper part of the nose. In the side view or 3/4 profile view, the nose protrudes. It's defined and rather small and elegant. The mouths tend to be small and are often portrayed with a line with varying thickness. The mouth corners have a thicker line, while the inner part can also have no outline here. Something that stands out to me would be that the mouths are slightly open often, giving the characters a more dynamic look. To me, this makes it seem like the characters are more in an action, like the pose they are doing is mid-action, which makes them appear more alive. Some characters also have more visible lips with shading added for them. Now for the eyebrows, these are rather thin, long and often slightly curved, giving the characters a more relaxed expression. What also adds to this would be that the eyebrows are higher up on the face. Overall, the faces in Simyeol's art radiate calmness. Expressions are rarely exaggerated. Most characters appear lost in thought, peaceful or softly smiling. Features are delicate and gentle. The simplicity here doesn't feel empty, it feels intentional, giving space for emotional rest. In a way, the faces kind of hold a dreamlike neutrality to me, the kind of serenity that feels both real and untouchable. They seem aware but untroubled, conveying stillness. There's power in peaceful expression. In a world that prizes reaction, being calm can feel countercultural. However, quiet composure can be more enchanting than constant excitement. The calm face reminds us that peace isn't the absence of feeling, but the presence of understanding, having trust even when not everything is known. When we practice patience and gentleness, we can learn to adapt a face at rest, lit by a quiet hope. The shape of the eyes is often an almond one that can be longer and thinner for masculine characters, while for feminine ones it can be taller. Female characters may generally have a bit bigger eyes with more of a square shape than male characters who have a more narrow eye shape. Many of the characters can also have closed eyes here. The eyes generally can be just half open as well. This, as well as the closed eyes, can lead to a more relaxed, peaceful and calm facial expression for the characters. The characters' eyes often have many lashes added to them here. They appear detailed due to this. The upper lash generally has longer lashes while the lower one has shorter ones. The upper lash also tends to be dark brown while the lower and outer part can be colored. The lashes can include a base, a shadow and a light color with reddish glows from the surrounding skin, adding emphasis and depth. 1 or 2 lines can be added above the upper eyelash. Often one longer one is drawn in directly above the upper eyelash, following the eye shape. The second line usually has more distance, it can be closer to the eyebrow than the eye. It also has more of a curved shape. Next I move on to what's inside the eye, the iris. The iris has a circular shape that is often also a bit squared off. It can be bigger or smaller depending on the character. It usually is rather big here. Here are layers I would use to create a similar eye shading result. First is a base layer, next a shadow layer, which would appear in the form of a shadow in the upper part of the eye. After this, we have an overlay layer which can be added to add more color variation and intensity to the lower part of the eye. Finally, we have a detail layer on which a border between the base and shadow color of the eye can be added. Other than this, I would use this layer for other colorful small details in the eye, such as circular shapes. The pupil here can take on the darkest color of the iris shading or an even darker color. It can also be made of an outline shape with a light inner part and dark outline. The shape for the pupil can be circular or also sharp. The iris outline can also be thicker at the top generally. There usually is one highlight placed at the upper part of the iris above the pupil. It tends to be rather small with a rounded shape. Sometimes the highlight overlaps into the pupil as well, and in a few cases no highlight is added as well, giving the eyes a more lifeless look. And finally, for the white of the eye, a shadow around the upper and outer inner eye shape can be added. Most of the time no shadow is added, and the white of the eye has a color like it is in shadow here. Next, I'd like to talk about the face shading. Firstly, the area around the eyes can have some blush added. A slightly red outline around the eyes is common here. The added shading around the eyes that tends to follow the eye shape gives them some depth. Shadows or even light tones can also be added around the eyelines and beneath the eyebrows. These often give the face some more volume here. Other than this, some blush can also be added on the cheeks of characters. The color added to the skin for the face shading here gives the characters some liveliness. What I find interesting is that often the most colorful parts of the face are the eyes, which draws attention to them. Eyes reveal what hearts hold. In art they enchant because they reflect light. Maybe you have also drawn an eye before and noticed how it only looked really alive after adding the eye reflection, the highlight. I remember first experiencing this when drawing portraits, how simply adding a small reflection for the light in the eyes immediately makes the character seem more alive. On the other hand, not adding a highlight can lead to an interesting, lifeless look as well. The eyes can be seen as lamps of the body. When they are clear, everything else brightens. An enchanting presence does not start with appearance, it starts with seeing others with compassion, curiosity, and genuine care. Most of the hairline art is used for the silhouettes. Inner strands can sometimes be portrayed with lines, but often they're defined by shading as well. Especially inner lines can also be painted over, and the hair tends to appear flowy and dynamic here. The hair ends can curl up in a way, adding a playful look. Hairstyles often seem affected by wind, adding to an ethereal look. The hair shading often features harsh contrast through light added to a few parts, adding focus to the head of the character. Other than this, the hair shading defines hair strands and adds depth to the head through more subtle shifts in hue, color, saturation, and value. A lot of sharp shapes, but also a few more blended, painterly transitions can be included here. The shading gives the hair a soft but also defined look. Zigzag shapes are often used to portray the hair strands. Next, for a shading layer setup I would use for a similar hair shading result. First is the base layer. After this, I'd add a shadow layer which tends to separate hair strands from each other while adding depth. Next, we have a second shadow layer which can especially be used at the hair part. After this, I would add a colorful overlay layer which can be used for transition areas from shadow to base or light colors. Then I would use a layer for light, not for highlights, but for light that is added by the lighting scenario. Some hue variation can also be included for this light layer. After this, we have a face glow layer, adding a soft hue that is similar to the skin colors to areas around the face. Finally would be the highlight layer. This tends to include small and long zigzaggy shapes around the forehead. The highlights here are brighter for the part in light, but they're darker than the light parts in the base color or shadow area. The highlights can also be colorful here with multiple hues, even added at times. The hair shading usually is brighter around the face shape and darker around the forehead. The horizontal shift in brightness here conveys a spherical volume of the head. Next, let's talk a bit about how features are portrayed when they are covered by the hair. They can either be fully covered or slightly covered. Especially the lashes can shine through the hair a bit here. Because hair in itself is light, it makes sense that the hair in these artworks often flows like silk in the wind, with soft shapes and light bouncing along the strands. Movement feels effortless, natural and alive. Sometimes the strands dissolve into the background light, suggesting both freedom and harmony with the environment. There's beauty in movement that isn't forced. The hair's flow reminds us that letting go, allowing life to move us instead of always resisting, can bring surprising peace. Trying to control every outcome makes us rigid, but openness lets life breathe through us. Just like how hair can be affected by wind flowing freely through it, we as people can learn to be affected by faith and flow freely in life through trust. Through believing that there's a purpose to life even when it's not visible. Letting go doesn't mean carelessness, it means confidence in something greater guiding the motion. The clothes often have a more flowy, elegant or formal look here. It fits to the overall ethereal vibe of the illustrations as well. Often long robes and flowing layers are used with some accessories, such as belts and golden jewelry added. The outfits appear detailed, royal and otherworldly. Many lines are painted over here, adding some visual hierarchy. The faces and heads have the most detailed, defined lines, while the other parts of the character and illustrations have less defined lines. What enhances this is that the silhouettes have more clear prominent lines than the inner parts as well. Most of the folds and clothing details are portrayed with shading here. Zigzaggy shapes and a mix of blended and painterly defined edges are common. What we wear, in art or in life, can express who we are without shouting for attention. Modesty can be enchanting, it can bring beauty that doesn't compete for the spotlight. The folds of fabric can remind us that covering can be just as expressive as revealing, that depth, mystery and restraint often say more. In a world that prizes visibility, grace sometimes means choosing simplicity, letting character, the person behind all the clothing, be the detail that stands out most. Illustrations can have just one main hue or multiple ones. Often the palette is influenced by the character portrayed in the illustration here. The color schemes commonly have a harmonious, calming look. Black and white areas usually add more emphasis to the colorful, saturated areas. The overall hue of the illustration tends to be used in the shading and general colors, giving the illustrations more balance. Something that may add to the enchanting look of simyeols art would be the atmospheric depth, a kind of mist that can be added for the colors here. The hues are generally cohesive and rarely harsh, evoking peace. Colors shape emotion, and the choices we make can color our lives. Too much intensity and color can overwhelm, too little leaves emptiness. Learning balance between joy and calm, passion and rest is part of what makes both art and living feel whole. Sometimes life can feel grey, colorless, dark and dull. Because nothing from this world is perfect, we may seek to find light and color in worldly enchantments, but discover that these are flawed as well. However, when we find the true presence that symbolizes light and color, we can find hope which lasts no matter what struggles or problems we may face. Overall, the colors in simyeols art have a dreamy look, which is supported by the aspect I'll talk about next, the shading or lighting. This can include a mix of sharp and soft shapes. The lighting can be strong, adding a lot of contrast. Usually, most of the character is in shadow and the parts in light add some interest. The lighting can also frame the characters here, adding some detail and a lot of atmosphere. The overall mood of the illustration can definitely be determined and enhanced by the lighting. Next, let's go over some lighting layers I'd use for a similar shading result. First we have a base layer, then we have a shadow layer with rather desaturated colors. Next is a lighting layer. Finally a hue variation layer, which I'd use to add more saturated colors. Something that stood out to me here is the texture that is added in a way through areas where you have multiple lines added. These lines are another common characteristic found in the illustrations, making them unique. How the lighting evokes serenity and wonder can make the artworks look more enchanting without losing realism and depth here. Light is one of the oldest symbols of hope. In art, it defines form. In life, it defines meaning. There's something miraculous about how light can change everything. A dim room feels alive when even a small flame appears. In a similar way, a mindset shift or simple acts of kindness can transform a heavy day. Walking in the light, not in a mystical way, but with openness, wisdom, and sincerity, can bring purpose. When you look at the light of life, you will find that it's not a mysterious enchantment, it's discovering and having clarity and purpose and a peace that follows through it. In simyeols art, the lighting has a dreamy atmosphere, which is enhanced by the aspect I will talk about next, the extra effects and backgrounds. A few of the artworks have simple backgrounds, including elements like flowers. Most of the illustrations feature dreamlike scenes with clouds or buildings and temple-like architecture added. The backgrounds have a mix of a full scene and some aesthetic elements that are commonly added. The elements that are included can depend on the character here. All the background elements often add a lot of depth and flow to the illustrations, also framing the characters. The character can, for example, be surrounded by flowers or butterflies. Elements like pearls and frames can give the illustrations a more luxurious look as well. Ribbons, flowers and frames would be the general elements that are very commonly added. They often add a lot of depth and flow to the illustrations. Smaller effects that can be added include particles and petals. Some motion blur can be added to these as well. To me, all the elements add to a calm, flowy, dreamy, ethereal and otherworldly effect of the illustrations. The backgrounds integrate, they exist in harmony with the subject, they're spacious, sometimes slightly blurred or abstracted, giving the figures room to breathe. Often, atmosphere and space are created through gradients, floating particles or soft texture. These subtle effects add depth without distraction. Occasional glows, petals or light fragments drift across the image, evoking motion and air. The world feels alive yet calm, everything contributes to balance. Similarly to the word enchanting, the word dreamy is something that fits to simyeols, backgrounds and art to me. In a way, all of these artworks and human creations, video games, movies, stories and so on, can be described as a dream since they are imagined but not real realities. What surrounds us shapes how we are seen, just as backgrounds do in art. Choosing peaceful surroundings or a deliberate mindset when being surrounded by different influences, people, thoughts, environments, the media we consume and so on, gives our lives space to breathe. The effects remind us that small unseen details create mood, even small habit adjustments and a few gentle gestures, a kind word or a patient pause for example, can change the atmosphere around us. Being careful with how what's around you affects you can help. You will encounter many influences in this world in the time you have on this planet, and you have the power to define how they will shape you, what you will do as a response. You can let these influences control you, or you can choose to reflect on them, only taking in and adapting what is good based on none of these fleeting, temporary influences. When we learn to not let the circumstances, what is around us in our day-to-day lives, define us but live out what's inside of us, what's given to us, love and purpose, we can integrate and adapt to any circumstance, to any background, while shining in a clear and bright way. In both art and life, the background matters. When it's used to support, the subject shines clearer. After going through the analysis, let's apply all of this in one illustration. As with my other art style studies, I'll draw my original character Yumari for this. For the sketch, I drew the upper body with one arm held up, the head being turned in a different direction from the torso. This adds a bit of interest to the rather calm pose. I also gave Yumari a slightly open mouth, and when sketching the hair I wanted to make sure to keep the dynamicness and flow I see in simyeols art by making the strokes light and free. Figuring out the hand pose took a bit of time, as the hand should be bent, but I wasn't sure how bent or how the fingers should be aligned. Also, let me know when drawing hands what is easier to you, drawing them with the palm side facing forward or with the hand back facing forward. For the pose I went with the back side facing forward. I added the outfit next. For this I included some ruffle parts and flowy fabrics as well as various patterns. I used the symmetry tool to sketch a first idea of the background. Then I moved onto the line art. This was all about keeping my lines as free and flowy as possible while going over the more loose sketched lines, narrowing the shapes from the sketch down to one clear outline. Not losing the dynamicness from sketches when drawing in lines is something that can be challenging for me. Using line variation in a good way is also important during this stage. For filling in the colors, I played around with the tones of the outfit. While I knew there should be a lot of light tones with some purpley or blue colors, figuring out the contrast for the outfit, what parts to make colored and what parts to make light, took a bit of time. I decided to also use some gradients here. Next, I blocked in shadows, determining the overall lighting setup this way. I wanted most of Yumari to be in slight shadow, with some light coming from the top right and from behind him. With the setup determined, I then moved on to shading each part, going through different colors one by one, using the layer setups I determined in the analysis stage. While I like to add palettes on the side of the character here to have the general base tones for each color, I sometimes use the color picker to add more various hues and transitioning colors. Then it was time to work more on the general composition, the background and the contrast. Making everything look cohesive together, I added some shine behind Yumari for this and painted over a few parts. After this, I went through the critiquing and fixing stage. I'll blend in what my notes for this were, what I determined I would like to change, and you'll see me adjusting the artwork according to this. This critiquing and fixing stage is something I like to do with any of my artworks and projects. After I initially finished the image, I spent some time, maybe 2 to 10 minutes, looking at the artwork, mirroring it and sometimes also making it black and white. I do this a few days to weeks after finishing the initial artwork, so I have a bit of distance from the image to give myself more of a new perspective. Like this, I'm able to just look at the artwork and determine points that look off, or for the art style studies specifically, things that look very different from that artist's work. I take notes writing these things down. When I have critiqued an image, I can then go and fix it according to my notes. I also like to fix the sketch and the line art before moving on to either the line art or the shading. To be able to do this, I find this kind of process very helpful. Sketching one afternoon on day 1, fixing the sketch the next morning, on day 2, lining the sketch that evening also on day 2, and then fixing the lines the morning after this on day 3, and finally shading the artwork on the evening of day 3 again. This means I work on the artwork over multiple days, and I can focus on just sketching, just fixing, just lining and just shading at once. How do you like to approach your artworks? Do you have different steps and stages you go through? Do you like to work in one long session or in multiple shorter ones? I'd love to hear your reflections on this. As you could see from the process, the fixing stage for this artwork was mainly about adding some background materials using Clip Studio Paint and painting over different parts. And like this, my illustration of Yumari is finished. What part of this study was most insightful to you? Learning about the eyes, the hair or the clothes, for example, let me know in the comments. I also hope the reflections on enchanting things in life and in art brought you some hope and inspiration. If we're talking about something truly enchanting, for me I also connect it to something that is kind of ethereal and otherworldly, something incomprehensible and wonderful, better than what we can ever imagine. And fitting to Simyeol's artworks, I connect this with heaven, a place without suffering, without temporary and not truly fulfilling worldly things, a place we can all reach after this life by making a choice. Some of the elements that can be included in Simyeol's art feature this symbolism which we as humans often connect to heaven. That's also why I wanted to include this reflection here. If we as humans are able to create beautiful things like artworks, just imagine how beautiful a place made by the one who gave us the ability to see, to recognize and to create beauty would be. You can find links to Simyeol's art in the video description. I really recommend checking it out if you haven't already. If you'd like to support me, you can also go to my Patreon. Along with the analysis in this video, I took notes in this kind of friendship book format and I'll share a full resolution version of this there. You can find a lot of other process videos and more on there as well. I look forward to adding more entries to this kind of artist inspiration book in the future. It connects to my childhood where I used to have many of these books. Some of my favorite ones were from Bella Sarah, Top Model and Lilife. Did you also have some books like these? What were they based on? I even filled them in year after year and now it's a nice throwback to see how I developed over the years, how my favorite music, my hobbies and interests changed over time and so on. That would be it for the video. Thank you for watching, have a nice day, bye.